Hello. Welcome to a game called um Schastye, something or other. I don't know what this game is about. Let's go right into it. Loading. Oh. Oh. I don't know what that says. What's Oh. Well, I guess I lit some incense. That's a little statue. Oh, I love how it's doing the thing where it's always looking at you. The little thing that video games do. It might be a 2D sprite. That's really good too, because if it's like a 2D sprite, it's the game itself is so crunchy that it doesn't look like a 2D sprite, even with it always looking at you. I don't know what that does. There seem to be kids playing outside.
Связывался учеными-мужами с упадком смыслов, наступлением века депрессии и всесторонним наползанием хаоса на цивилизацию. И нельзя сказать, что они полностью ошибались. Значит, нам нужны новые символы,
Yeah,
новые
I don't speak this
необходимо
language, so I don't
обновлять
know
эти
what's going on
полные
there.
таинственных значений в переходное
Restart.
время.
Yeah, restart. Oh.
Артур Круиз. Реквием по Сократе.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Если же соль потеряет силу, то чем сделаешь
Continue
ее?
the story.
Стал ли человек
Interact with the interactable objects. Oh, I just got an achievement. That was literally everything to interact with in this room, in this game? I'll be damned. Uh. Oh. Ah, it's one of these. Okay. Let's see. It's April 2004. My name is Ivan Alexandrovich Yato. I work as a car mechanic in the Russian town of Nizhnevartovsk. I don't know how to pronounce words in other languages. Unfortunately, bear with me. While in my free time, I enjoy coding and literature. I have been married for 6 years. However, 4 years ago, I had to part ways with my spouse. Oh! It didn't happen earlier due to the 2 kids we had. Do you know what a quine is? A quine is a computer program that outputs its own code. Perhaps a more romantic person than I would compare it to a self-fulfilling prophecy. The divorce with Anna Matvievna Yatow has not made my life easier. The most difficult part of it all was not being able to see my sons, Misha and Andrei Yatow. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce the last name. So, apologies to anyone who is affected by me mispronouncing it. I don't actually know how to pronounce it. I'm doing my best. My sons, Misha and Andrietta. At first, their mother would try to hinder our meetings in any way she could. Then she took them and moved to Nefjugansk, severing our contacts completely. Being left by myself, I succumbed to the solace for which my nation is so notorious among the educated world. Vodka. Oh, I see. My actions were caused additionally by a series of cuts at my place of work that resulted in me losing the job. After spending all my remaining savings on alcohol, I had to move in with my mother, for I was not able to pay the rent. Ooh. It's curious how similarly our brain reacts to some neurostimuli. It is proven now that most of the lingual formations invoke identical neural responses in the brain of most people. Therefore, the reading of this text, for example, would induce the same neural reaction in almost any human reader. We were living on the ground floor. My poor elderly mom hardly left the apartment. While I started my morning with a bottle of Talca on the bench in front of our building, that way, I have soon found friends. The company was rather motley. It consisted of squalid acad- academicians, academics basically, Afghan veterans unable to find themselves in civil life, Turkmen janitors, and silent, sinewy laborers who would spend their daytime at the job site, occasionally beat their wives, Jesus, and drink heavily in the evenings. The latter looked as though they were born through condensation. That's a hell of a way to describe someone. On the gray concrete walls of this town, being the literal extension of it, one person stood out among them. His name was Fedor Ivanovich Rybkin. I'm not exactly sure how he ended up in our company. Fedor Stepanovich had a stable job, engineer at Tarhovsky Ltd, a two-room apartment at the Lenin Street, and, as I learned later, a small home library. When drinking, he never acted aggressively, never cried and complained. As a rule, his eyes gained some sort of a spark, and from a puny bald man he would transform into a charismatic, almost inspiring figure. One wanted to follow him. I got to know him better last winter. In the evenings, our company would roam about in the neighborhood. We would hang out on the porches, playgrounds, and yards of nearby apartment buildings. That evening, a janitor called Maksut and his homeless friend Vinetchka were having their usual fun, singing loud songs in the yard, terrorizing bypassing teens, and occasionally fighting each other. Fedor Stepanovich followed them quietly, while I was hit by a tide of melancholy, an emotion characteristical for the period of my life. At some point, I just sat down on a frozen tire sticking out of the ground. Snow started falling, wind was howling in the pipes above, but high-rises around the yard were hiding me from it. I still had a bottle with the remains of Talca in my hand that I was gradually finishing. Snow sticking to my face has already stopped bothering me. My eyelids were heavy. It was getting harder and harder to keep my head up until I finally fell into a heavy crepuscular dream. I was having the usual murky visions that one experiences when under the influence. White trees that emanated quiet crackles, seemingly electrical in nature. Ooh, surrounded me. Somehow I knew they were sycamores. It was hard to see anything as a wall of impenetrable darkness started at arm length. Aside from crackles, the trees seemed to emit a different sound. It was quiet, light music, so tender and strange that it became instantly clear. It was not of human origin. After wandering for several minutes, or maybe days, I said minutes or days, that's quite a, you know, quite a relevancy there. I've stumbled upon an edge of the world. The stripe of white soil simply ended with a clean border. There was only darkness ahead. As I stepped past the margin, I began my unnaturally slow descent. I looked up and saw the world gradually revealing its underside. On it, an enormous creature sitting in an insect-like pose. It looked remotely like a monkey, had snake eyes, and was wearing some sort of mushroom-shaped hat. Its blue monkey lips were stretching in an uncanny smile, revealing a row of enormous yellow teeth. I woke up in an unfamiliar apartment. That wasn't a very big surprise. Suffering from hangover, I was struggling to identify whose apartment it was. The room was hardly furnished. All it had was a bed, on which I lied, a writing desk with a computer, and a colorful poster depicting John Lennon. I guess that poster was John Lennon. Stumbling, I proceeded to the door. Bookshelves occupied most of the next room. A pillar in the corner stood a small wooden statue, depicted a sort of a sort of midget. Okay, with a snake-shaped penis and a weird mushroom-like hat. Well, you know, I'm glad we didn't take a close look at that statue. A saucer filled with dry sticks of incense lied before it. It emitted light smoke. I could hear the sound of something crying from the kitchen. As I went, I saw Fedor Stepanovich Rybkin wearing an old morning gown. He was frying some eggs. Something from the Beatles was playing on the radio. I awkwardly asked where the toilet was. He pointed silently. As I urinated, I felt more and more uneasily. What was that weird thing in his living room? Why did he bring me to his house? He must have known I had my keys with me. Strange explanations came to mind, mostly homoerotic in nature, but I swept them away bravely. Finally, after gathering up the courage, I returned to the kitchen. Even now, my memories of everything that happened in the next year are crystal clear. Fedor Stepanovich turned out to be a decent man. He told me more about his job at Tarkow, shared a story of his own divorce. Then he showed me his library. It was a rather strange collection. I saw a hip little book by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, one exemplar of Chapiv and Void by Victor Pelevin, even a shabby Al-Azif by A. Al-Hazred. What's that sound? Who's talking? However, most of the space was occupied by a collection of works of some Marcel Grial. For some reason, the name felt familiar, as though I have heard it sometime in my childhood. Fedor Stepanovich seemed somewhat surprised after I asked about the nature of Grial's work, but was kind enough to answer. Marcel Grial was an anthropologist Africanist, known for his studies of the Dogon people of West Africa. One can still acquire records of his expedition to Senegal in 1933, as well as some rather unconventional methods used by Grial during his research of the extensive and surprisingly sophisticated mythology of Dogons. About 5 volumes of his works are dedicated to a certain family of mushrooms, usually referred to as Teth. According to Grial, in the very developed astrological culture of Dogons, this particular mushroom was known not only as a celestial projection of the star Sirius, but also as a physical embodiment of a certain nameless god. It is rather hard to make out what the nature of the nameless god is, at least from Marcel Grial's entries, despite the numerous descriptions of allegedly real dialogues that took place between the author and the nameless deity. All of them appear to be very vague, filled with unclear vocabulary and queer metaphors. I was beginning to understand something. When I again about the strange figurine, instead of answering me, Fedor Stepanovich led me to the room where I woke up initially. He sighed and opened a table drawer. There was a couple of tiny dry pea mushrooms in there with thin long stems lying there. He offered me one of them. After that experience, I have almost quit drinking. With the help of an old friend, I found a new job, which helped my mother and me immensely. Another thing I needed money for were the experiments that Fedor Stepanovich and I were now carrying out. We acquired the Tet mushrooms, that's what the mushrooms in the drawer were, through Rybkin's relative, a Soviet Africanist. He was sent on a scientific mission to Senegal under the order of USSR. At the time, the sale and use of mushrooms was not regulated in West Africa, so the relative was able to bring a large amount of them back as a souvenir. In his turn, Marcel Grial was kind enough to describe in detail how to contact the nameless god. Of course, the figurine I saw earlier depicted that very nameless god. Why did I want to meet it so badly? I have never taken drugs in my life. Maybe I wanted to get through to somebody outside the gray-colored garbage that was the universe around. I needed to complain to someone who wasn't comprised of the same nausea-inducing substance as the world I lived in. I desired an answer. I wanted to know exactly why I've been trampling this earth for 40 years already. Fedor Stepanovich, in his turn, was led by pure scientific interest. In the first phase of preparations included a series of intense meditations. For hours we would sit cross-legged, freeing our heads of endless quarrels that various inner dwellers of our minds would have had between each other. As we succeeded, it turned out that it was just these quarrels that our minds consisted of. Knots would loosen up on the ribbon that was our consciousness, gradually become unwoven, and fall down in rings, until finally disappearing altogether. The rest was easy. Each of us needed to take 4 grams of the teth mushrooms and build a means of transportation that would take us to the nameless deity. After some discussion, we have decided on TA3-2402, Volga, because both of us were familiar with that car model. I was responsible for visualizing the hood and chassis, while Fedor Stepanovich dealt with the steering system and the car body. About and I don't know what it said, like 3.5 hours of painstakingly rebuilding the familiar vehicle from scratch in our minds. Sometimes the car part would turn out weird, then tremble and disappear into thin air, in which case the whole process had to be repeated. Finally, a glowing automobile soared in front of us. Its windows were shining with rainbow glares, and its tires were ringing subtly like bells. Rybkin took the place behind the wheel, and I sat beside him. The engine was emitting a quiet electrical crackling. We took off. The tires rustled as the walls of the room started to move according to their axes. The left and right walls were pulled behind us. The ceiling flashed with sparkles as it jerked upwards. The floor was stationary for a long time, until it suddenly crumbled entirely, falling off in geometric shapes. Steadily accelerating, we flew through fractal spaces. The world around was changing constantly, acquiring new shapes that grew out of one another. Turning inside out, red and orange spheres bursted open as they turned into blue, infinitely long, sharp towers connected to each other by numerous thin lilac bridges that rotated in countless dimensions and unfathomably turned back into orange spheres that were now covered in an innumerable amount of copies of themselves, gyrating, gyrating, gyrating. Finally, the engine went silent. We were here, in the forest, the one that I saw in my dream. The sky was just as black, but one could now see a huge golden sun shining through the darkness. The nameless god with snake eyes was waiting for us in the middle of the forest. His grin was infinitely more terrifying than the figurine could convey. Fedor Stepanovich fell on his knees. I attempted to do the same, but quickly discovered that I didn't have any knees, nor did I possess a body. Something strange was happening to Rybkin. His face looked just like the sound of a car horn as his whole body gathered into some sort of spindle, as though readying itself for an energetic jump. The attention of the nameless god was wrapping itself around Fedor Stepanovich's head in the form of a golden glow. When it focused into an infinitely bright dot, there was a loud snap, and Rybkin disappeared. My following dialogue with the nameless god is almost impossible to describe with words. It wasn't exactly a dialogue either, for it turned out that the nameless god, as well as I, as well as the forest around, and the absence of Fedor Stepanovich Rybkin in it, are no more than mere disturbances on the surface of the ribbon compromising our minds. Nothing existed out that but that ribbon, so it was only natural that the ribbon itself did not exist either. There was but one wish keeping me from forever diluting in the absolute knowledge of the world's essence. All I strive for now was to share this incredible godly blessedness with every one human being in the universe. Then, employing the voice of Fedor Stepanovich Rybkin, the nameless god told me about the prophecy. The prophecy is a combination of words, the general semantic sense of which would lead any human reader, no matter the age, sex, or nationality, to get a complete, instant grasp of the essence of existence. The understanding does not come directly. All the prophecy does is activate neural change in a specific order. As a result, the path into nothingness is built into the reader's subconsciousness. Any person who read the text would inevitably revert to their original form. To put it simply, the reader would forever disappear from this world, severing the unwinding the vines of their existence. As I came to my senses in the living room, I saw Fedor Stepanovich lying near me, unconscious. His nose was bleeding. My head was killing me. Well, that was in time. I went to the room with the computer. John Leonard was still there, looking at me from the poster. After swallowing another 2 of the pale mushrooms, I opened Word and started typing the prophecy. As you probably guessed, you are reading it right now. The nameless goddess dictated me the words of the prophecy, and I will remember them forever. When I type the last word, my existence will stop, as will stop the existence of any person who read it. Farewell, Andrusha and Misha. Farewell, Fedor Stepanovich. Where we are going, there will be no...
Oh, Jesus Lord!
God, that ending got me. Well, that was Shast or whatever.